QMS. I will then touch on some of the global as well as local landscape. What are the things that are concerning a number of organizations across different sectors, and what are the trends that we're seeing? Towards the end, we'll touch on some of the essential requirements, and we'll also talk about potential journey, potential options that organizations can take or pathways that they can take, and how they can proceed further to make sure that the information that they hold of their clients, of their stakeholders, that they want it to be protected. So a bit about BSI for most of the clients or potential clients who are aware of BSI. We spread globally across, and Australia is one of the most important countries for BSI as far as the information security landscape is concerned, and that is purely on the back of the awareness that a lot of organizations have had recently. We do have around 4,600 employees globally, and we do audits anywhere around 232,000 audits a year, and roughly over 200,000 delegates go through some form of training for BSI on an ongoing basis. Why is managing risk so important in our QMS? It's one of the most important things that keep on coming in. When the new version of 9001, which is the QMS standard, 2015, it brought in an entirely new risk-based thinking. The idea was to ensure that risk is considered from the beginning of the process, and throughout the process it's considered. It's an integral part of how a QMS system needs to be based on. It also ensures that there are proactive actions being taken as part of the strategic planning that we do in our businesses. Also helps identify opportunities. So people usually associate risk with a lot of negativity, but do not realize that risk or managing risk proactively can help bring much more opportunities to the business. Every ISO standard is based on a single formula, which is called as NXSL. So the way the standards are written are also commonly approached. What it gives us, or what NXSL provides us, is a framework for all ISO management system standards. And risk is the most common theme that comes across all the standards, and that is common between a standard like 9001 as well as ISO 27001, which is one of the most popular information security standards. It is worth considering taking an enterprise-wide approach to risk management to assist in future integration. So that's what NXSL helps with. Our auditors do audits across the globe, and one of the most common themes that has been identified is, and the risk that's been identified among the QMS audits that we do, is information security and the increasing awareness of privacy and the regulations around privacy requirements, and that has become important for businesses across the globe, irrespective of the sector. Whether it's healthcare, whether you're in healthcare sector, manufacturing, services, or any form of business, irrespective of the size, information security risk and privacy have become the talking point. 82% of the CEOs put cyber risk as one of the top 3 risks. So it's extremely important, and that's as of 2016, and this number has significantly grown since 2015. So let's talk about some of the global trends, information security landscape, what's happening out there globally. The amount of data that keeps on increasing, for example, 90% of data in the world today has been created in just last 2 years. 50% of the workers trust an open Wi-Fi network. They could be at the airport, they could be sitting in a lounge, or sitting in a restaurant or cafe, and they trust an open Wi-Fi network. The spend on information security, along with the awareness, has increased significantly, which is close to $93 billion in any form of product or services. By 2021, the damages related to cybersecurity and the cost associated will cross $6 billion alone. The key measurement of key trends and statistics that we've identified is 4% of the recorded data breaches were secure breaches. So when I say 4%, so only 4% were secure. So breaches happened, but nothing major of the data was stolen, or nothing was at risk and was subsided, which means 96% of the breaches that have happened have been successful, which is massive. Coming back to Australia and seeing some of the statistics in what's happening in here, the cybercrime is costing the Australian economy up to $1 billion annually in direct costs alone. So we're not talking about any indirect costs. Australia is ranked 5th in number of the exposed records by country, and the exposed records for breach are massive. The Norton came up with a report back in 2017 and said that not just bigger businesses or larger organizations were at risk. It came up with a number of over 500,000 Australian small businesses who fell victim to cybersecurity or some form of cybercrime. So it's not just larger organizations. Every single organization that is connected via internet, which most of us are privy to some form of risk. Looking at the notification, so this is a new requirement, and this came in last year, that any privacy breaches need to be notified. And when you look at the statistics of 2019, there were 250 notifications so far. The key statistic is that only 4% were related to some form of system fault, which could be a software or a hardware issue or a glitch. The remaining 95% or 96% was just because of something that could have happened out of human error, or could be a malicious attack that an employee within an organization has fallen victim to. I thought it would be a good idea to share some of the examples. So, and these are some of the examples in 2019 alone, okay? These are some of the famous brand names that we associate or may have our own personal data as well. So, you look at Optus, look at Toyota, Australia Post, a couple of universities in there, My Health Record, the biggest information security breach, Bunnings Warehouse, New South Wales Revenue, and there are many more. We have referenced where you would be able to see where the breaches have happened and what has happened in those breaches specifically. So you should be able to read what are the kinds of breaches that happen. I brought in the example for Bunnings for a specific reason. An individual worker tried to do the right thing, okay? Confirmed, and Bunnings has confirmed that and notified it with the Office of Australian Information Commission of a data breach, that they had put in some of the data on their personal computer and they wanted to work from home potentially. And that's caused a significant issue and has led to a breach in privacy. Luckily, the data that was breached was contained and specific to a particular store and not the Australia-wide all the Bunnings warehouse information. So these are some of the issues that we do come across from time to time, and we've done numerous audits, and there are situations that are brought forward saying that this is a trend that we are seeing, increasing trend. If I give an example of BSI, I get an email regularly saying that someone's potentially tried to send you a malicious email, which is filtered by our sophisticated systems. But like the way technology is getting smarter, people who wanting to breach the data are also getting smarter, meaning they will find ways, or they are able to successfully gets this and potentially cause a massive risk and a massive.
On the main screen.
Any questions so far?
That's all you see. The whole time, or just now?
No? Okay. I'll move forward. So coming back to the point, there are certain trends that we've identified, and there are certain key parameters that we always try and look at as to what and why the data is trending, and the information security becomes tricky. Just excuse me for a minute. I think my connection is being disconnected. Should be back online in the next couple of minutes.
Please put presenter mark so we should be able to.
Guys, it's automatically reconnecting. Apologies, it's taking a couple of minutes. I'll be back online.
Everyone else can see it.
Hi, Dan. Yes, I can see the slide. It's gone back to the beginning.
Good, thank you. Can we ask a question for you? Only what I was wondering is, you need 4 transit cases, is that correct? Oh, yeah. You need 5, okay, cool. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm only using the one that you've got so far. I don't know if they've got any of those in the factory, so I'll have to see what I can do. Yeah, right. Thank you. Cheers. There we go.
Okay, yep. Okay, so I'll talk about some of the most concerning consequences of cyber attacks. The top 3 that comes across is business interruption, reputational damage, and the breach of customer information. There are instances where there is extortion is in some form of ransomware attack, or there are liabilities to third parties which become equally important as well. And in some cases, it's also noted that there is loss and theft of intellectual property, which is key to our QMS. The insider incidents is something that comes up as a trend where employees, contractors, third parties with access to company data, they should all be considered when it comes to enterprise security. There are accidental lapses in security through carelessness, negligence, and there are, in some instances, there are contractual or legal obligations that we have to comply with and make sure that the information that we have, either of our customers or any other stakeholders, are safe and secure, where they are stored, how they are transported, or what happens with the data. We've also looked at some of the key important cybersecurity standards. Now, 27001, which originated as a British standard, has become globally the most popular framework of implementing information security in the management system. As I pointed out earlier, it is based on the same NXSL structure, which makes it easier for us to integrate our QMS into and use that framework to have information security compliance in place. There are, however, a number of other standards that support information security. For example, if you look at 27002, it focuses on code of practice for information security controls. What are the controls that we need to have in place to manage our systems, whether they are related to a hardware or a software, or whether they're related to individual requirements of any company. There are newer standards that have come in and have become increasingly popular. For example, 2718, which focuses on code of practice of protection of personally identified information in clouds. There are also different cloud security standards, but they all start with 27001. So that's the base on which the management system should be founded. 27001 shows that a sensitive customer and company information is safe hands. So it's not about complying with the requirements internally. It's equally important to demonstrate to our clients, customers, stakeholders that the information is secure, and you should be able to demonstrate that. And the idea of continual improvement or managing risks doesn't go away. It's on the same lines that we see in our QMS as well. Okay. Now, some of the 27001 clients that we have done the research with, or done host of information that we've received on the back of audits being done in the form of feedback received, is that it reduces our information security risk by 75%. It doesn't mean that necessarily having a standard in place or being compliant to 27001 makes you secure 100%, but it does minimize your risk significantly. 80% of the businesses feel that it inspires trust amongst the stakeholders, amongst the clients. It reduces the likelihood of mistakes, obviously helps increase the competitive edge, and complies with the regulations. And the regulations in the privacy space have been increasing year on year. I am sure a lot of people would have heard of GDPR that came into being on May last year, and it's one of the single most important changes that happened in Europe in and around privacy. Now, 27001, yes, it's the most common standard being adopted globally, but who is it suitable for? It suits any large, any small organizations, whether public, whether private sector, and it's particularly when you need to demonstrate. There are a number of tendering requirements, number of stakeholder requirements where either you're liaising with government or any other third party where they request you to demonstrate that you are managing your information securely. There was a significant change that happened last year where organizations dealing with ATO or number of payroll companies were asked to demonstrate whether they had all the payroll information that they had in some form of software was managed safely and securely. Now these requirements are increasing, but they aren't as onerous purely because if you have a QMS system in place, 50% of the work's already done because you've got systems and processes in place. It's about embedding it in your QMS and making sure that the information that you have or you manage is secure. It does, as I pointed out earlier, it does inspire customer and stakeholder trust and upholds the reputation, but it also reduces the likelihood of a breach. There are a number of pathways that an organization can take. It's not a right or a wrong way to go about a particular pathway, but these are the three most common approaches that the organizations that we deal with take. First is doing it yourself, making sure you're aware of the requirements, have a copy of the standard, go through the requirements, and get the buy-in from the leadership team, resources and budget, and put a system in place that's compliant with the requirement. On the other hand, there are organizations who go through an intensive training in and around implementing information security. They may start with something called as an introduction or understanding what the implementation requirements are through some form of training. One of the most common themes that's identified to implement any standard that includes information security is to get buy-in from senior leadership team in your organization. Have them understand what's the importance, how does it help us keep our reputation in state. And I think senior management briefing is one of the most common form of training delivery that happens across organizations in Australia to simply get the buy-in. If it's too onerous and if you're pressed with time because of the stakeholder requirements, there are options where you can rope in a consultant who is reputable and have implemented similar systems with other organizations, big or large, provide them a scope of work that you would like to do, give them a draft timetable, and they should be helping you to be able to deliver that. The timelines that we have stated on your left hand side are indicative. They do change depending on the size of the organizations, the scope of the work you've defined, and the number of offices or sites that you may have that you would like to bring under scope. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the entire organization in the scope at the same time. You can define the scope of the work and the pace at what works with you as far as your requirements are concerned, and obviously the resources available at hand. Some of the next steps are, and I think what we propose is a tailored solution, a solution that and an approach that varies, and every organization will have something different. Number of organizations that I have personally spoken to are meeting these requirements already or are compliant. They are looking for a gap analysis as a third party to come in and review their systems and say, yep, what are the areas they should be working on and how can they work with us to improve their system. Yep, that could be a potential way. On the other end, there are organizations that say, nope, we haven't done anything in this space so far, but it is an increasing requirement from our stakeholders or customers, and we are seriously considering taking this pathway either to just implement a system within our organization or having a third-party certificate. I think the best place to begin with is making sure you identify the training needs and the solutions, and we can help you do that, and then work out a plan of what and how it needs to be done, what are the time frames, and how we can take this forward. The solution would vary from an organization to organize, but we can certainly help you with that. We've got our website details in there, contact information, either email us on info.oz, info.nz if you're in New Zealand, our call line numbers. Please make sure you mention that you've attended the webinar and looking for a tailored solution, and we should be able to help you out with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dishant. So everyone, there was a slight technical problem with Dishant's computer, so for a period of time he wasn't able to see the slide. So apologies for that. Hopefully it wasn't too much of an inconvenience to you all. Thank you all for continuing to attend. I can see that everyone's pretty much still here. I am conscious that it is now past the time, but we are opening up for another 10 minutes for question time. I noticed not too many people have any questions, but now's the perfect time. If anyone has a question to do with what Dushyant has just spoken about, particularly if you're interested in integrating an information security management systems with your QMS, or at least looking into it, we can certainly help you out. Did anyone have any questions? To ask a question, there is an icon just above the chat box, and below the names, it's a raise your hand icon. If you select that, we'll be able to see who has a question. We'll get you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Did anyone have a question? Yeah, Chris, did you want to ask your question?
Yes. Yeah, I heard that, so with the assessment of 27001, that would be obviously a management system that we would have in-house, but we also are considering possibly hosting customer data on an Azure server, for example. I assume that's another location that would be assessed as well?
Yeah, so usually what happens is Azure locations are typically certified and go through different processes, and it's called a dark site. Okay, so if the question that we ask is it manned or unmanned? And in most cases they are unmanned sites. All we need to do is review and have a walkthrough of that site for physical security in most cases, and that should be it. So we do have to, but it just depends on the situation and where the location is and what your contractual obligations are for that particular location.
Actually, yeah, what I meant was as a virtual location.
Yeah.
Yeah, not so much a physical, because the location of Macquarie Park, it's probably like Fort Knox anyway. So.
Yep, virtual locations, they don't need to be audited.
Okay, thank you. So that means, I guess, when you assess or audit the whole management system, I guess we would, obviously, as long as we're covering that virtual location Azure server in our management system, I guess that covers the whole system then with the audit.
Yeah, that does.
Okay,
I think the key consideration should also be taken into account when people who are using or privy to the information that's been provided, and what do they do with the data and how information is being kept secure as well. So that's also a key consideration that needs to be taken in. Because if you looked at the data that I provided, I think 35% of the data breach happens because of a human error, not because of how good our systems are, or whether it's a software or a hardware. Because I think most businesses spend a lot of money and budget for it, and they do really fantastically well. But if we still if people within our business aren't aware of why it is important for us to keep the information secure, that kind of makes organizations vulnerable as well. So that's an important consideration all organizations need to make.
Thank you.
If there are any other questions that you have, you can certainly type your questions in the chat box. If there are any specific situations that you would like to discuss with us, you've got our details, please feel free to do so. What we'll do is we'll summarize and send through a follow-up email to all the attendees as well, including a checklist that we will send through, which is specific to information security. You certainly can use that tool and go through the checklist and maybe do an internal review. I wouldn't call it an audit, but at least do an internal review and see how you go against it. And if there is anything else that you require, we certainly can discuss that with you and take that forward. Just one last thing before we sign off. I'm not seeing any other questions pop up, but before we sign off, we do send a whole heap of information, including certain key white papers that our marketing team work with, based on what the global trends are in this space, what are the changes that are happening, how people are implementing that. That includes some case studies as well. We do send them out on a regular basis through our marketing team. So if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, please do so. I think it's a very, very important communication tool that we use for our clients and making sure that they are aware of current trends and insights in different fields, especially in this area, because this is the most important talking point at the moment in a number of countries. I'm not saying just in Australia, but it's the same in Japan, same in Taiwan, same in Europe, same in US, no different. Okay. I think I've got a question. William? William, can you ask your question? I'll have to unmute you. Dan's just going to unmute you, William.
Oh, hi there.
Hi. Can you ask your question, please?
Yes, I was just curious between the difference of ISO 33001 and ISO 27001. As I understand, they're both to do with risk to a great extent, although I just wanted to get clear that the ISO 27001 was purely about information systems and 33001 was about risk in general. Was my understanding on that correct?
Yeah, so there are a couple of standards in 30,000 series. So the first one being 27,001 has a set of requirements that are auditable, okay, which is very similar to 9,001. 31,000, which is another standard which we use or we reference a lot as far as managing our risk is concerned. Okay, so that's one of the most important standard and a framework, globally accepted framework to manage our risk. Risk management, because it's integral part, you can use the framework and use it towards your implementation, not just for 27 but also for your 9001. So that's kind of how it all fits in. For 33,001 standard, if that's the specific question, that's something that does not come up very often, but is being used by some organizations in process assessment. It does talk about performing the process assessment, or if how to go about measuring those frameworks. But primarily, it's 27,001 is the standard that organizations use purely because it has set of requirements that are auditable, and then it does link into other 27,001 series standards as well.
Right. So 33,001, just to confirm, that does not have a set of auditable elements. Is that right?
It does, but it only focuses in a small aspect of process assessment.
Right.
Okay, not the entire. It doesn't give you a wholesome idea of managing information securely. You know, we're talking about a small aspect of information security rather than everything else. So that's where the difference is. If you look at 33,001, you're looking at process assessment, which focuses on concepts and terminology, but it has other series of standards. So if you look at 33,002, it will talk about the requirements on performing a process assessment. Then there's another series of standards, 33,003 or 33,004, which talks about requirements of measuring those processes frameworks.
Right, and there is no need for, if one is going to implement a 27,001 system, there would be no need to complement that with a 33,001.
Correct.
Right, okay, sure. All right, thank you.
No problems. Any other questions, guys? I'll just go through the chat box and see if there are any other things being raised so far. No? Okay, I'll hand over to Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much, Dushyant. That was very informative. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. If there's no other questions, we will end this session because we are a little bit over time. But if you did have think of something but you didn't have a chance to ask now, certainly here are our contact details. Please make a note of those and feel free to inquire because we'll be able to help you in the background. Thanks everybody. I will now end this session, and we will send you out some follow-up emails and the recording as well. Okay? Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.